Yume Nikki. Unlike the last indie game we covered on here, which also happened to be made in RPG Maker, I'd be hard-pressed to call Yume Nikki a small or niche title. Its reputation really speaks for itself. Originally released on June 26, 2004, for free on pseudonymous developer Kikiyama's website, receiving regular updates until 2007, it's a title that, in large part, inspired a generation of RPG Maker games, horror or otherwise, be it Ao-Oni or Ib, or even more recent titles like Omori, and yes, even One Shot. Yume Nikki's influence can be felt in a lot of the RPG Maker games that have similarly managed to become cult classics in their own right, which is strange because Yume Nikki is a relatively simple game. While never outright confirmed, it was seemingly developed by a single person, the aforementioned Kikiyama. It doesn't push the boundaries of what the RPG Maker 2003 engine is capable of. Many of the mysterious worlds and the many dreams the player explores are made up of simple, looping parallax backgrounds with several oddities shown about. And most of the game is simply spent walking. Yume Nikki also lacks most of the puzzle-solving elements that would in time become a staple of its successors. And yet, Yume Nikki remains a cult classic, with a thriving and dedicated community. With so many fan games, there's an entire wiki dedicated to documenting them all, be it fan-made sequels like Yume-tuki, or original titles using their Yume Nikki formula like .flow. Even once you finish exploring Madotsuki's dreams, you'll likely never run out of other dreamers to follow into their sleep. So why is this exactly? What has given Yume Nikki this remarkable staying power and continued influence on the RPG Maker landscape? And not just that, but why do I love it so much? Just what makes Yume Nikki so terrifying? When you launch Yume Nikki, you're dropped into the bedroom of the protagonist, Madotsuki, with little to no preamble. There's no introductory cutscene, no context given to the player about their objective. You're not exactly given a whole bunch of options, which is largely an indication of what we can expect from the rest of the game. The player is really left to make up their own conclusion on what exactly is going on here, even from the very start. The only thing that we know for sure is that Madotsuki is a hikikomori, a term that refers to a person within Japanese culture that completely withdraws from society for any number of reasons, potentially including anxiety. And the game very simply communicates this to the player by having the protagonist shake her head if you attempt to leave her room. Everything else, why exactly she withdrew from society, why she lives alone, why she began to keep the titular dream diary, which is also the method of saving the game, is left completely ambiguous. Even from the very start, Yume Nikki is full of mystery, and it's this, as we'll explore further, that I think is a key part of the game's identity, its ability to unnerve, as well as how it has managed to stay relevant 18 years since its initial release. Once the player has exhausted all their options and decides to head back to bed, and Madotsuki heads to sleep, this is when the game truly begins, as you can begin exploring the dreams of our reclusive protagonist. There are 12 worlds that can be accessed from the get-go, from a location referred to as the Nexus, the uppermost layer of Madotsuki's dreams. The rest of the worlds can be discovered through exploring these initial 12, with many different entrances to other worlds and layers of the dream world scattered throughout. The general gameplay loop of Yume Nikki revolves around exploring as much as you can, memorizing certain paths where you've been previously, and attempting to use this knowledge to discover new areas. Honestly, Yume Nikki's approach to exploration kinda reminds me a lot of the original Legend of Zelda. So much of the game world is freely explorable from the get-go, and it's up to the player to discover deeper secrets through continued expeditions to different areas of the map. However, you'll soon learn during your time with Yume Nikki that the worlds of Madotsuki's dreams are far, far darker than the lands of Hyrule have ever been. The atmosphere throughout the dream world is immediately palpable. Even in worlds that appear more normal, such as the forest world or snow world, there's always something that doesn't feel quite right. I think this is, in large part, due to Yume Nikki's wonderful soundtrack. Most of its tracks are short, playing on loop, generally being ambient instead of overpowering. They are perfectly fitting for a nightmarish dreamscape, somehow simultaneously relaxing and unnerving. They feel as much a part of each world as its inhabitants and overall aesthetic. Combine that with the fact that each world is chock full with any combination of bizarre, unnerving, disgusting, or downright terrifying imagery, and it's no wonder there is a constant feeling of dread during each journey into the dream world. But Yume Nikki is a game without cheap jump scares or even any real antagonist. The closest you get is the Tori Ningen, which teleport you to an inescapable room if they catch you, forcing Madotsuki to wake up. And thus, even in that sense of dread, there's a feeling of comfort, of safety. Exploring in Yume Nikki, personally, feels like the video game equivalent of meditation for me. It is a very personal, introspective experience, contradictory as it may sound, and in fact, there is a lot in regards to my feelings toward Yume Nikki that feels contradictory. The sense of dread that remains despite that safety is due to the player's own determination, their morbid curiosity to see what bizarre or disturbing imagery the game will throw at them next. And there's a lot to see, believe me. Whether it's an oppressive wasteland that resembles the remains of civilization after a nuclear war, a sky garden overlooking a city, a world of darkness, a spaceship in the vast emptiness of space, the definition of liminal spaces, a classic mall, or a red, pulsating maze simply known as hell. Yume Nikki's dreamscapes are chillingly beautiful, and locations I look forward to returning to time and again. The same goes for the world's strange inhabitants, the deformed survivors of that nuclear war, the infamous Yuboa, the aforementioned hostile Toriningen, and the bizarre yet peaceful passengers of a train. Yume Nikki may be nonsensical, but everything about how the dream world is crafted is memorable, and it makes it feel varied and alive and unnerving. The main objective of Yume Nikki, which is yet another thing not outright communicated to the player, is to find and collect 24 effects scattered throughout the many worlds of Madotsuki's dreams. While many of these are quite useless and purely cosmetic, ranging from comical to rather morbid, though on some occasions some are required to reach certain areas or trigger different events, the player must collect them all to trigger the ending. By the way, spoilers for an 18-year-old storyless game coming up. Once you've collected all 24 effects, returning to the Nexus and dropping all of them will allow you to trigger the ending. And in true Yume Nikki fashion, it's just as bizarre and unexplained as the rest of the game. After doing this, if you wake up and step out onto Madotsuki's balcony, there will now be some steps next to the railing. Walking up to these and pressing the interact button will cause, well, just watch. That's right. At the end of Yume Nikki, at least based on the information presented to us, Madotsuki takes her own life. And that's the game, bizarre and unexplained from start to finish. If you've never played through it yourself, you're probably thinking that Yume Nikki sounds a little weird, maybe dumb, but ultimately nothing special. How do you get invested into something that provides seemingly so few answers? Well, you see, questions are powerful. There's a reason that long-running media answer questions slowly and continue to leave new ones. It keeps the viewer coming back season after season, volume after volume, sequel after sequel, wanting to see those loose ends tied up. Some like to leave questions unanswered for good, leave it up to the viewer's own personal interpretation. It keeps discussion about the series going even long after it finishes. Yume Nikki is kind of an anomaly because all it ever gives the player is questions. As mentioned previously, even from the very start, the most basic information is left up to the player's interpretation. Why is Madotsuki a hikikomori? Why does she continue to have these dreams? What do all of these dreams mean? And why does she make the choice she ultimately does at the end? Why is dropping the effects what triggers that choice? None of these questions are ever answered, and they never will be. And you know what? I'm glad they won't. Naturally, over the years, many theories have sprung up attempting to explain what's really going on in Yume Nikki and what the game is trying to tell us. There's obviously a lot that we can infer and extrapolate about Madotsuki, her fears or trauma, as well as the world she lives in, or at least the way she perceives it, from the dream worlds. One of the most consistently brought up is how the abundance of sexual imagery or metaphors in the dream world implies that Madotsuki is in some way a victim of sexual assault, which could explain why she withdrew from society and became a hikikomori. Trauma, especially of that nature, as you likely already know, is a very common trigger for severe anxiety and depression. And I would agree that at least on some level, that is one of the main themes of Yume Nikki, and Madotsuki clearly suffers from severe anxiety and bears some kind of trauma. There's just ultimately no way of knowing for sure. But that's what keeps the player, or at least me, coming back to the dream world. We have an innate desire to find answers, so we look for that next world, that next effect, that next event that will finally explain what's going on and provide just a little bit of clarity. If Yume Nikki explained all of its mysteries, I truly don't believe it would have had the massive impact it has ultimately had. The search for answers in the end is futile, but because of that, the lingering questions remain in players' minds long after they finish the game. It's been 2 years since I did my first full playthrough of Yume Nikki, and I still find myself pondering the why of it all. If it isn't obvious yet, I really think the bizarre and unexplained nature of Yume Nikki has become its strength. Not only does this award it staying power within popular culture, but it also has unparalleled staying power within my own mind. The way that Yume Nikki has lived rent-free in my head is really unlike anything else. One of the things that consistently makes me lose my nerve when it comes to horror games is a lack of control. If a game limits my options and makes me feel powerless, that's when I start to genuinely become scared. A great example of this is in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, where all you have at your disposal to fend off the nightmare animatronics is a flashlight that works against you if they're right outside your door. It feels like a dice roll every time I turn on the light, and that lack of control starts to make me feel anxious. Yume Nikki invokes the same powerless feeling because of the lack of understanding. The dream world keeps that sense of dread because I don't get it, and those questions that prevail in my mind unnerve me because no matter how much I explore the game, I'll never be able to answer them. I will never be able to tell you why there's a nuclear wasteland in Madotsuki's dreams, why one of the lowest layers of that dream world is a simple train. I'll never be able to explain what the hell Yuboa is. And most importantly, I will never truly understand why Madotsuki, this character I spent hours and hours with and exploring the dreams of, makes the choice that she does. The mysterious nature of Yume Nikki is more than likely compounded by the mysterious nature of Kikiyama themselves. They still, to this day, remain completely anonymous, and we can't even be sure that they are a single person. Up until Yume Nikki's Steam release and that of its reimagining/remake, we couldn't even be sure that they were still alive. Essentially, they released and completed Yume Nikki, then just vanished. And it has been a long time, since 2007. It was only when Playism confirmed that the remake was made under Kikiyama's supervision were we made aware that they were still active. And given that even under their pseudonym, they've never given an interview about the game, it really helps Yume Nikki, and then themselves, remain an enigma. For all we know, Yume Nikki could be based on Kikiyama's own experiences. Whatever trauma that Madotsuki is clearly implied to have could be based on their own. Or perhaps they just wanted to tell a story about that. Or maybe Yume Nikki is indeed just intended to be entirely nonsensical. Just as it is impossible to know what Yume Nikki is really about, it's impossible to know what Kikiyama's intentions were in developing it. And with all that I've said about the ambiguous nature of Yume Nikki and how this has become its strength, and one of the biggest reasons it remains so terrifying and unnerving, I'm so glad that that will likely never change. I don't think that I'll ever stop returning to Yume Nikki. It might be a little pretentious, but it genuinely has become one of my favorite games of all time. I find myself getting lost in Madotsuki's dream worlds again and again, at least once a year at this point, and its ambiguous and non-linear nature makes it so easy to return to. I always feel like I find something new whenever I return to fill out a new dream diary. And yeah, I could easily watch a video showcasing all of the worlds and events, but I outright refuse to do that. Yume Nikki is a strange case, because even with my overthinking brain, which has a habit of kicking into overdrive when it comes to the things I love, I don't want to understand everything when it comes to Yume Nikki. I never will. It's a futile endeavor anyway, and the feeling that there is always more secrets to discover in the dream world just enriches that atmosphere and overwhelming sense of dread. The hold that Yume Nikki has over me is the same as I believe it has over everyone else that has ever been influenced by this bizarre game. The desire for answers, the desire for more, is what has allowed the influence of Kikiyama's strange Freeware title to be felt within the indie landscape to this day, while allowing the original continue to stand the test of time. For as long as it continues to fester in the minds of players, I'm sure it'll keep inspiring new developers. You can play as many Yume Nikki fan games as you want, and there will still be nothing quite like returning to the original Dream Diary. At least for me, all of the feelings I've described in this video never seem to fully go away. So with that in mind, even if we'll never fully understand what Yume Nikki is trying to say, there is one message I think it has, inadvertently or not, pretentious as it may be, that is abundantly clear. In many ways, ambiguity in media is terrifying, but it's also chillingly beautiful, and it might just become a tremendous strength. Thanks for waiting, and thanks for watching. Happy Halloween! And thank you to my amazing patrons. I can't thank you enough. If you enjoyed this, why not like and subscribe for future overly pretentious video essays? But that's all from me for now. Stay safe, and good night.